Have you ever watched a franchise desperately grasp at straws, making moves that scream, "We have no idea what we're doing," while pretending everything is under control? Because that's exactly what might be happening in Toronto right now, and the implications are absolutely staggering. The NHL free agency frenzy has come and gone like a tornado through a trailer park, leaving destruction in its wake, and the Toronto Maple Leafs standing in the rubble, still searching for answers to their most pressing problem. Mitch Marner's departure has left a gaping wound in their top six that's bleeding goals, bleeding chemistry, and bleeding any realistic hope of competing this season. But here's where it gets interesting and potentially catastrophic. Instead of swinging for the fences with a proven veteran, the Leafs are reportedly preparing to roll the dice on a 22-year-old German winger who couldn't crack Chicago's top six. Lucas Reichel, the former 17th overall pick, is suddenly being positioned as the solution to Toronto's offensive woes, and the proposed trade package will either be remembered as brilliant or absolutely disastrous. The desperation move that could define everything. Let's cut straight to the heart of what's really happening here. According to Heavy.com's explosive reporting, the Toronto Maple Leafs are actively exploring a trade with the Chicago Blackhawks that would send Nick Robertson, David Kampf, and 2 fifth-round picks to Chicago in exchange for Lucas Reichel. On the surface, this looks like a routine hockey trade, young player for young player, with some salary cap maneuvering thrown in. But dig deeper, and you'll discover this is actually a referendum on everything the Leafs believe about talent evaluation, player development, and championship building. Lucas Reichel enters this conversation as a fascinating contradiction. Here's a player who was drafted 17th overall in 2020, high enough that Chicago viewed him as a cornerstone piece of their future. He possesses the kind of skill set that makes scouts drool: elite vision, exceptional agility, and the hockey IQ to create plays that lesser players can't even imagine. Yet, in 70 games last season, Reichel managed just 22 points, 8 goals, and 14 assists, while spending most of his time relegated to Chicago's fourth line. For a player with his pedigree and potential, those numbers represent either a colossal development failure or a simple case of wrong place, wrong time. The key question becomes, is Lucas Reichel a talented player trapped in the wrong system, or is he a bust masquerading as a reclamation project? The Nick Robertson parallel that changes everything. Here's where this story becomes truly compelling. Nick Robertson's journey with the Leafs mirrors Reichel's experience in Chicago so perfectly that it's almost eerie. Both players were highly touted draft picks who showed flashes of brilliance early in their careers. Both have struggled to find consistent roles in their respective top sixes. Both are entering what could be make-or-break seasons for their NHL futures. Robertson, drafted in the second round in 2019, burst onto the scene with a spectacular playoff goal in his first postseason appearance. The kid had fire, passion, and the kind of intensity that Leafs fans had been craving for years. But consistency proved elusive, and despite flashes of brilliance, he never secured a permanent spot in Toronto's top six. In 69 games last season, Robertson tallied 15 goals and 7 assists, numbers that are remarkably similar to Reichel's production. This isn't just a coincidence. It's a mirror image of two young players whose development has stalled in environments that might not be maximizing their potential. The psychological aspect cannot be ignored. Robertson grew up as a passionate Leafs fan, which should have been an advantage, but might have actually created additional pressure. Sometimes the weight of childhood dreams can become a burden rather than motivation. For Robertson, Chicago represents opportunity without the crushing expectations that come with playing for your childhood team. The Blackhawks are rebuilding around Connor Bedard, which means patience, development time, and the chance to play meaningful minutes alongside other young, hungry players. The David Kampf factor. Addition by subtraction. David Kampf's inclusion in this trade proposal tells us everything we need to know about Toronto's current salary cap situation and their willingness to make difficult decisions. At 29 years old, with 2 years remaining on his contract at $2.4 million per season, Kampf represents the kind of middle six player that championship teams need, but rebuilding teams can afford to sacrifice. His 13 points in 59 games last season don't justify his cap hit, especially on a team that's desperately trying to squeeze every dollar of value from their payroll. But here's the fascinating wrinkle. Kampf previously played 4 seasons in Chicago before joining Toronto. His familiarity with the Blackhawks system could make him a valuable veteran presence during their rebuild. For Chicago, absorbing Kampf's contract is essentially cost-free during their rebuild phase. They have the cap space, and he provides the kind of veteran leadership that young players like Bedard need to develop properly. It's the kind of win-win situation that makes complex trades possible. The Auston Matthews connection, nobody's talking about the most intriguing aspect of this potential trade, isn't what's being discussed publicly, it's what's happening behind the scenes. Lucas Reichel has never had the opportunity to play alongside elite talent like Auston Matthews, William Nylander, or John Tavares. In Chicago, he was stuck in a bottom-6 role on a team that was prioritizing other players' development. Imagine Reichel receiving passes from Matthews in the offensive zone. Picture him with the space and confidence that comes from playing alongside legitimate superstars. The Leafs' offensive system favors creative players who can find space between the lines, exactly the kind of environment where Reichel's skill set could flourish. Gordon Monroe from Editor in Leaf has already pointed out that Toronto's structure provides more developmental tools and less immediate pressure than Chicago's current situation. At 22 years old, Reichel still has time to develop into the player Chicago thought they were drafting. The international component adds another layer of intrigue. Reichel's solid play for Germany in international competitions suggests that his struggles in Chicago might be more about fit than ability. Sometimes a change of scenery is all a young player needs to unlock their potential. The high-stakes gamble that could backfire spectacularly, here's where this story becomes truly nerve-wracking for Leafs fans. This trade represents a fundamental shift in philosophy from trying to acquire proven veterans to betting on unproven potential. It's the kind of move that either looks brilliant in 3 years or becomes a cautionary tale about overthinking simple problems. The Leafs are essentially wagering that they can develop Reichel into the top 6 winger they need, while simultaneously hoping that Robertson finds his game in Chicago. It's a double-or-nothing proposition that could solve multiple problems or create entirely new ones. From a financial perspective, the trade makes sense. Reichel's contract is entering its final year at $2.4 million, giving Toronto flexibility to extend him if he succeeds or move on if he doesn't. The Leafs would also clear nearly $3 million in cap space, providing the financial flexibility to make additional moves. But from a competitive standpoint, this feels like a team that's running out of options and time. The Leafs' championship window with their current core is closing rapidly, and betting on a 22-year-old's potential development might be a luxury they can't afford. The Bedard effect. Why Chicago might be the winner. The Blackhawks' perspective on this trade is fascinating because it highlights how rebuilding teams can extract value from other franchises' urgency. Chicago gets a motivated Robertson who could thrive alongside Connor Bedard, a veteran presence in Kampf, and 2 additional draft picks to help stock their prospect pipeline. More importantly, they're moving on from a player who clearly wasn't fitting their system. Sometimes the best trades are the ones that simply acknowledge reality and move forward accordingly. Reichel's talent never disappeared. It just wasn't compatible with Chicago's current needs and structure. The Robertson-Bedard connection could be particularly intriguing. Both players have the speed and creativity to complement each other, and Robertson's intensity might be exactly what a young superstar like Bedard needs to push his game to the next level. The verdict: championship dreams or desperate measures? This trade proposal forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about the Toronto Maple Leafs' current situation. They're no longer in a position to make the kinds of splashy moves that guarantee immediate improvement. Instead, they're forced to make calculated risks on players who might develop into solutions. The success or failure of this trade will ultimately depend on whether Lucas Reichel can unlock the potential that made him a first-round pick. If he can find chemistry with Toronto's stars and develop into a consistent 20-goal scorer, this trade becomes a masterpiece of value extraction. If he continues to struggle and Robertson flourishes in Chicago, it becomes another example of the Leafs' inability to properly evaluate and develop young talent. What makes the story so compelling is that both outcomes are entirely possible. Reichel has the skill set to succeed in Toronto's system, but he also has the track record of a player who has struggled to find his place at the NHL level. The next few months will determine whether this trade represents the kind of creative problem-solving that championship teams employ, or whether it's simply another example of a desperate franchise making moves for the sake of making moves. One thing is certain, this trade will be remembered as either the moment the Leafs found their missing piece, or the moment they definitively proved they don't know how to build a championship team. There's no middle ground in hockey trades this significant. What's your take on this potential blockbuster? Are the Leafs making a brilliant move by betting on Reichel's untapped potential, or are they making a desperate mistake that could haunt them for years? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because this trade could define everything about Toronto's championship hopes, and every fan's opinion matters when the stakes are this high.